Turron Davenport from the USA Today. He joins us here for our conversation on the Birds and Panthers on 97.3 ESPN. Turron, a Thursday game always makes things a little more hectic, but I guess today's kind of the calm before the storm. Are they out of town yet, right? They boarded?
Yeah, they boarded and they're gone soon after Doug Peterson's press conference at 11:15. And you're right, it does make things a little more hectic, and that's especially the case when you have a team that's traveling. You know, fortunately for this Eagles team, they don't have to go far, but still you lose a day, Wednesday, in your due to travel. So it'll be interesting how it all works out.
Let's start with the nuts and bolts here. Lane Johnson out, and I opened up the one of the segments with how different this is, because last year you could make a case, you were there, Turron, that Vaitai essentially blew that game up down in Washington last year. But him playing in a fill-in role this time feels a little different.
Well, yeah, if you have your first NFL start against a guy as good as Ryan Kerrigan, it's going to be a struggle for most players, let alone Vaitai. So, I mean, it's going to happen. This week, the Panthers, they have legitimate pass rushers. You know, you got Julius Peppers and 5.5 sacks. So it's going to be a fun matchup for the Eagles. They just have to make sure that they scheme in order to help him. So one of the ways that they could do that is by chipping. You use your tight end, use your running backs to go ahead and help out and block.
Yeah, what does the pass rush look like from Carolina match up this Eagles offensive line? There was some talk, what's wrong with this line? And a lot of people suggested, look, the line's not having issues. Sayamala has been the problem. And since he's been out, it seems that this line has been one of the better ones in football. But now you make another change, and then you have this, pass rush from Carolina that 2 years ago, when they went to the Super Bowl, they were excellent. So how is that matchup with the offensive line?
Well, I think the main mismatch, well, not even mismatch, but the main thing that could trouble the Eagles' offensive line is actually Star Lotulelei. And you're talking about a guy who is as strong as anyone in the league, but also has quickness. Think Haloti Ngata, that same type of player, a crazy mix of strength and quickness for his size. And that's something that could be a recipe for disaster for a guy like Jason Kelce. But one of the things I like about Kelce is he fights, and he's someone that you could get him out in space, and you could kind of scheme around a guy like Lotulelei by running a screen game, and that uses Kelce to his strengths. So I think that would be the issue. Like, you got the pass rushers, those guys are there. When they want to blitz the interior gaps with Thomas Davis or Luke Kuechly, that's something that they could do. But I think for the most part, the offensive line, that struggle could be in the middle of that offensive line because, they have two very solid defensive tackles.
Interestingly enough, you mentioned Starr in 2013. I was a big proponent of drafting him at number 4. The Eagles obviously went with Lane Johnson, and here we are 4 years later, and those guys are big, keys to both of their teams. Now, Lane went 4, Starr went somewhere a little deeper, but I remember that year really, because the Eagles were coming off, their defense was a big problem in 12 and then going in 13. Having a guy like him would have really shored up some things. But it's funny how that all has kind of worked out. That Lane, we know the record for the Eagles when he's not out there, and now you're talking about Starr being a big issue for them. So I guess both teams kind of made out with that draft pick back in 13.
Yeah, and Carolina was fortunate to be able to have him available to them when they did. It was primarily due to there were some heart conditions that they saw with Lotulelei, and that caused him to drop just before the draft. So he definitely was a guy that was supposed to be a top 10 talent, but he fell to the Panthers somewhere in the 20s, I believe it was, and they were able to really grab him. But speaking of Lotulelei's and the draft, there's his younger brother, Lowell Lotulelei, is pretty good right there in Utah also. So he's a guy I profiled last week in my prospect profile that I do every week. So, he's someone else to consider.
Talk with Turron Davenport from the USA Today and getting ready for Eagles, Carolina. Patrick Robinson, I saw Pro Football Focus. He's ranked as the #1 corner in all of football. And amazingly enough, there were some people that thought he wasn't going to make the team. My question really is, how much has he kind of solidified that secondary? How surprised are the Eagles with what he's given them? And when Darby's ready to return, does his role change at all?
Well, with all due respect, I'm not sure that I place too much importance in the Pro Football Focus rankings. I'm sure Eagles fans could agree.
You
looking
mean
at
on Monday Night
the grades.
Football when they run Sunday Night Football, when they give you their number, that's not giving you any gospel there?
Nah, and I know Eagles fans could agree with some of the grades they've given Carson Wentz, but nevertheless, yes, definitely Robinson is a guy that has definitely turned things around. I talked to him last week before the game. I think it was that Wednesday. We talked about confidence and how his confidence is very high and how he's very, very comfortable in this defense. And it's interesting because you saw him play on the outside more, which was where he struggled initially. So when he moved inside to the slot position, the nickel cover in the slot, he was able to settle in, but they moved him back outside, and he did well at Arizona. So he's definitely helped solidify the secondary. I think the play of the safeties really helped. A really underrated thing for the secondary last week was getting Corey Graham back, because that allowed you to drop Malcolm Jenkins down into the box, and then he was able to cover Larry Fitzgerald. He was a big part of minimizing Fitzgerald's effectiveness. So when you look at their three safety look with McLeod, Graham, and Malcolm Jenkins, and then you have Robinson, who they start playing on the outside. You have Douglas rotating in, and Jalen Mills. I think they're in good shape there in the secondary. Most importantly, they just have to get to the quarterback up front. And I think this week is when you have to not only get to him, you have to finish the play.
Right.
And for the receivers who are able to uncover when they work the scramble drill, these cornerbacks have to plaster themselves to the receivers, and in talking to them, that's something that they definitely understand.
Turron Davenport, USA Today. Turron, this week, last week I thought Arizona could have done a better job using Ellington out of the backfield. I go back to the game last year against Detroit, where they got burned in the backfield a couple of times with some passes late in that game that ultimately cost them the game. I mean, the couple of touchdown passes to Riddick out of the backfield. They've got a back that they can do something with similar in McCaffrey. Is he the guy that you think is the biggest matchup problem, or is it maybe the physical 6'5" receivers that this Carolina team features?
I would say McCaffrey. Ultimately, the biggest problem for them is the quarterback. But that's something that you look past that when you're talking about individual players, because obviously the quarterback's going to be the big option, especially with a guy like Cam. But that being said, when you look at McCaffrey, they could run him out of the backfield. They use those jerk routes, let him run those from a slot position. He has 27 catches. He has a touchdown as well. And one of their plays that I really liked was against the Lions, where Cam was able to break contain in the pocket, and you saw McCaffrey come from the left side to the right side across the middle, and they were able to find him for a big gain. And these are the type of things that a guy like McCaffrey brings, because he's quicker than the bigger guys, like Funchess and Benjamin. So now you have someone who has that quick twitch and change the direction and can uncover himself quickly. Whereas when you look at Benjamin and you look at Funchess, these are guys, they're power forwards. They're guys that you use on the outside on the boundary, and you throw those back shoulder throws to. But when the play breaks down, it's a little more difficult for them to get going again. So it's easier for corners like Rasul Douglas and Jalen Mills, Robinson, et cetera, to be able to turn and run with these guys when they try to uncover. So that's something to look at. But one thing that can't be overlooked, and when I asked Schwartz about Cam Newton, he said that that Newton is as good a pocket passer as anyone in the league, which I'm glad he did, because Cam doesn't get enough credit for that. And this year he's really showing. So you have a guy that can stand tall in the pocket and deliver the ball too. So I think you have to defend every blade of grass against this team. And like I said, things break down. That's when McCaffrey could really come into a play.
Turron, Brandon Graham, 4.5 sacks in 5 Thursday night games. Vinny Curry, 4 sacks in Thursday night football games. The last couple of games, the Eagles have faced offensive lines that I think I could compete for a spot on with the Chargers, the Giants, and that Arizona line last week was terrible. How's this offensive line? Is it a little bit bigger challenge for the Eagle front?
Well, it looks like they'll be without Khalil this week, so that's something that definitely be an issue for them. That's their starting center. And then you have the Eagles possibly getting Big Fletch back, so that'll definitely help. Tim Jernigan is underrated with how he's playing. You look at what he's able to do, firing off the football very low, getting that quick twitch off the snap. And when you have those two in the middle, if you have a backup center, that's a disaster. And I just talked about Cam being in the pocket. Well, guess what pocket passers hate? They hate to have the pocket collapse to them. So that's something that they should be able to do this week. And I say Fletcher Cox coming back. He's obviously questionable, so we don't know for sure. But especially if he does come back, that's going to be an area where they could attack. And then also you look at just their wide nine alignment. Chris Long is coming into his own, and obviously Brandon Graham, Vinnie Curry. The rookie Derek Barnett, he's not getting the sacks, but he's making a lot of really good plays also. And then if this is a week where they could get Steven Means in the mix too, I mean, they go pretty deep on the line, so that's a good thing for them.
And obviously, Turron, the Eagles' offense has been very good balance, too. On the ground, they run the ball very well. They did really well against New York and Los Angeles. They didn't run the ball as well, but still effectively against Arizona. The Panthers ranked first in the NFC in total defense. They only give up an average of 274 yards per game. So where's the weak spot that the Eagles can attack? Is it in the run game, or is it via the passing game?
Oh, I think by all means it's the passing game, especially now I have to check their injury report, but I know Darryl Worley and James Bradbury, neither one of them practiced yesterday, I think it was. So we'll see what their status is. And even if they do play, listen, they don't match up, right? You look at Alshon, and even their number 3 corner going against Aguilar, just like Desmond King against Aguilar in the Chargers game, that's a mismatch. That's an area that they could go to. And that's something I think they needed to focus on. They need to start taking advantage of Aguilar on the number 3 corners. So that's something they could do, passing the football. Running the ball, I mean, look, Luke Kuechly is so instinctive. Thomas Davis is just a very solid player. And then on top of that, you have the young linebacker, Shaq Thompson, coming into his own also. So this is a team that's coming around. They sell out against the run. And I think that's why you have to attack them in the air.
The Eagles lead the NFC in total offense, almost 400 yards per game. They're second in the conference with 137 points. Are we starting to buy into this Eagles offense as a team that can beat you in multiple ways? I mean, I talk a lot on this show, Turron, about building equity, and what you do week to week and us believing in you. Have they built enough equity that if a team says, we're going to take your run game away, we'll beat you via the pass. If you're going to take your pass game away, we can beat you via the run. Are they the model of balance right now in the NFL with that number 1 ranked NFC offense?
Well, I'm not going to say the model, but they've definitely shown that they could find different ways to win. And one of the things with the Eagles, they could be a passing team, they could be a running team. I think over the last 3 weeks, they've shown that they'll continue to try to run the football, which is different from last year. So now you have to worry about both things. Doug Peterson I think he always understood, but he's applying it now, that you run the ball to pass, and that makes it a lot easier for their young quarterback. So it's a complete offense. It's a problem for any defense to defend, so that's something to look at.
Should be interesting there. You mentioned Nelson. Nice catch last week. I think he's on pace for about 60 catches, about 900 yards, 7 touchdowns. He is certainly finding a role. And then it was good to see Torrey last week finally get open. Do you think that those 2 plays will allow the Eagles to take some more shots with Carson, and the fact that he completed them just adding to his confidence in the deep ball?
I think they're going to take shots for sure, because what's pretty much happened with this team, if there's something that is doubted that they could do, they go out and do it. And that's what you saw running the football in week 4 or week 3 and 4. And then you saw that in week 5 that all the doubts about Carson Wentz and Torrey Smith, connecting on the deep ball, they were able to go out and do it. So I think when you look at just the deep threat that these guys offer, I think it stretches out the field. And when you look at the overall picture of things, it's allowing Zach Ertz to do what he's doing. So you start to see Zach Ertz really start to operate underneath and in the mid-range passing game.
Turron Davenport, everybody, USA Today, Eagles Wire, as the Eagles getting ready to head down to Carolina to take on the Panthers. You can hear the game right here on 97.3 ESPN. Follow Turron at @Davenport_NFL. And on the short week, do you think Lane would have played on a Sunday?
That's a tough question. It's very possible, but they really kept everything secretive as far as how he was in the concussion protocol. He seemed okay after the game on Sunday, but, I mean, you got to take that for what it's worth. He said he was good, but, it's really hard to tell. I don't know.
What about Smallwood? I mean, he's got like a mystery injury. They're not really giving you much there, but it went from, hey, how did he get hurt? Well, it happened during one of the 4 quarters of that game on Sunday. Gee, thanks. To not playing, to now look like he might not play again?
Yeah, I think the injury to the knee, from what I understand, is a swollen knee. And with that, that's pretty much just a time thing. And it's unfortunate because Smallwood can't stay healthy. And Deuce Staley said it during training camp. He said he's like a small car with a big engine, always overheating. And that's kind of what you're getting with him. But when healthy, he's definitely a good option. But, yeah, it's just gotten worse. He might be one of the ones that could have played had had they had more time.
At @TDavenport_NFL. Follow him for Eagles and Panthers on Thursday night. Take care, pal.
All right, take it easy.